Heavyweight boxing fans, what's the deal? So I'm back with another old school post-fight. Gonna go to 1977. Now this was by request. Ken Norton versus Jimmy Young. Very telling fight in my opinion. I've watched this fight probably about 4 times in my life. And every time I watch it, man, I think Jimmy Young won. Every time I watch it. I watched it last night. I gave him 9 rounds. When I watched it before, I gave him 8 or 9 rounds every time I watch it, man. Now going into this fight, Norton was rated number 1 by the WBC. Young was rated number 2 by the WBC. The winner was supposed to fight Muhammad Ali. Get a shot at Muhammad Ali. Ali was actually in the crowd, jumping up and down, screaming. I believe he was pulling for Young in the fight. He kept saying that he don't want to fight Norton again. Young beat him. From the stories I've heard, that's what he was saying. But you can clearly see him in the front row, jumping up and down, doing his theatrics. But scheduled 15-rounder. And Young was one of them type of guys, man, where as much as I love Ali, he's one of my top 5 favorite fighters of all time, I thought Young beat him too. Because Ali came into that fight, I believe he was like 230 pounds, his career high. He was forced to fight a Sonny Liston fight, Joe Frazier, Foreman. He didn't want to be the aggressor. He didn't want to be countered, and that's a totally different fight. But with this Norton fight, man, yes, Norton was putting on the pressure. Even the first 3 rounds, for example, I gave those all to Young. I know Norton was putting on the pressure. He was flailing away with body shots, but Young would just grab him. Young used to pick his spots. He was picking his spots with Ken Norton. He would land a 1-2. Sometimes he'll get in the close range, and then Norton thought, okay, I got him. Young would get off first, a 1-2 upstairs, and then grab him. They'll separate. The next time they get in that same situation, close to each other, Young will switch it up. Then he'll just grab him. He was switching it up on Kenny, man. And he was using the jab. He was circling Kenny. He wasn't wasting that much energy, which was amazing from Jimmy Young. Like even the Foreman fight, the Lau fight. If he got a guy with big punching power, he never got intimidated. He never got scared or ran around the ring or wasted movement. It was the same movement. He could have a fucking Mack truck standing in front of him going full speed. He would just be calm. He was a very calm fighter, man. Between him, Ali, Holmes, you probably won't throw Ellis the first part of the decade. As far as pure boxers, they have to be up there, man. As far as counter punching, and all those guys have to be up there. I thought Jimmy Young won this fight. Again, I thought Norton had his moments. A lot of people thought that he won the 14th and 15th round. I thought Young was coming on late in the fight also. I thought he was landing some shots. The guy only had a 20% KO percentage, so when he did land hard, it wasn't going to rattle or jar anybody. And we all know that Kenny Norton, he would have classic fights against guys who wasn't huge knockout punchers, just like this fight. The Larry Holmes fight, which he ended up fighting Holmes. They had a classic fight, but Ali, all those fights, and to tell you the truth, if you want to say he won 2 out of 3 of the Ali fights, I couldn't argue with you. You know what I mean? So he had a lot of success against guys who didn't have crazy power. Now, he went in there against guys like Cooney and Foreman, guys who can crack. That's when he had problems. You know what I mean? So in Jimmy Young from 1976 to 1977, that year span, he fought Ali, Norton, Lyle, and Foreman. Had I been judging those fights, he would have won all 4 of those fights in a year span. But he went 2-2 against that bunch. He won 2 against the come forward power punchers, and then he lost 1 against Ali, and then the 1 against Foreman. But I thought he won all 4 of those fights. That's a 1-year span where this guy fought Ali, Norton, Lyle, and Foreman. I thought he took Norton to school, man. I really do. Now, I know this is very hard to debate. Obviously, the judges gave it to Norton. A lot of fans gave it to Norton. But when I watched this fight, man, I just don't. He landed the more effective, cleaner shots, in my opinion. He controlled the ring. I know Norton was coming aggressive, and he was, like I said, flailing hooks and wild shots. When he was throwing his jab, because, Norton had that thing where he would stutter step with his lead foot, and he would do a lot of feigning and weaving and bouncing and jiving with his lead shoulder, and he would have you guessing sometimes. And when he was doing that, then he'll extend that jab. He landed some good jabs on Young. He had, he was effective in a few areas. He was landing some hooks and uppercuts here and there, but I thought Young was really controlling him. Besides that, everything else wasn't effective to me. Yes, he was aggressive, but it really wasn't effective when you're hitting the guy's elbows and then he wraps you up and then walks you back into the middle of the ring, jabs you to death, and then starts circling on you. Maybe, I don't know, man. Maybe the refs or the judges probably thought that just the aggressor, the guy that's doing the stalking, is winning. But then, well, how could he lose the Ali fight then if that's the case? I know Jimmy Young, man, I think he was just underrated. I think he was underappreciated by the judges, by the fans, the media. Just underappreciated, man. Now, going into this fight, Norton 6'3", 80-inch reach. Jimmy Young 6'2", 79-inch reach. And I believe Young just outweighed him I believe Norton outweighed Young by a few pounds. So they're right around the same size. Young was not going to be intimidated. He had the size to back it up against Norton, being virtually the same size, although Norton physically appeared with his muscle and the way he was built just way stronger than Young, which I thought was a little bit deceptive, being when Norton got in there with guys that were around the same height and weight as he was, but they had power in their hands. He didn't do so great against those guys. His chin, I'm not going to say was shaky. It's just he was too wide open and get hit flush. And against big power punchers, he paid the price, just the way his defense was. That's why I always thought if he would have fought Frazier would have beat him. I think Frazier just would have mowed Norton down sooner or later. And I also read in a Frazier autobiography that, according to him, in that autobiography, that he used to get the best of Norton in sparring. That he used to mow him down in sparring and get him against the ropes and have his way. But I had Jimmy Young winning this fight, man. Just ring generalship, the cleaner, effective shots, great footwork, head movement, using the jab, controlling the distance. When he did get close and he didn't want to work, he just grabbed. Then he would switch it up, like I said, on Norton and land quick 1-2s and then grab him. But Norton applied the pressure, but I just didn't think it was effective, man. So my fourth or fifth time watching this in my life, I still got Jimmy Young winning this fight. And when I watched it last night, I gave him 9 rounds. And what's so ironic about Young is after this fight, he went on a losing streak, and he went into the early 80s with his career. And he fought undefeated fighters, Greg Page, Tubbs, Tucker, Dokes, took them all the distance. He took all those young up-and-coming fighters of the early 80s the distance. Cooney, I think he retired in that fight, but Cooney was undefeated. But I know he took a handful of these young up-and-coming guys, took them all the distance. And those guys went on to be champions. And he took them all the distance, even as a guy that was way out of his prime in a whole different decade. But I got Jimmy Young winning this fight, man. Although I know they gave it to Kenny Norton. That's my post-fight review. I'm out.